Welcome to the presentation Deep Dive into MeeGo and the Nokia N9. If you have any questions during the presentation, don't hesitate, just ask your question. Just for that, wait for the microphone to come to you and then ask your question. So before I start, a few words about myself. I'm Yoann Lopes. I'm from France. I hold a master's degree in embedded system engineering from the University of Toulouse in the southern and sunny part of France. I joined Nokia in November 2009 and to work on Qt. So for the past 2 years, I've been working during the first year on Qt Graphics View. I've been a maintainer for it. I still am one. And in the last year, I've been working more on the SceneGraph project for QML, and more specifically on text rendering. You maybe have read my blog on Qt Labs about distance field text rendering. So as you can see from what I'm doing, I'm passionate about graphics, but when I'm not doing that, I actually also enjoy doing mobile development. That's why I'm here to talk to you about the N9. And well, when I'm not doing anything of that, I enjoy going for a ski ride on the hills nearby Oslo. And I also am a music lover. I play cello, guitar, and piano. So that's it about me. Let's go back on our subject, the N9. So here it is. I believe some of you got one today. What do you think about it? I think it's a really, really great phone. I think it's a beautiful device. It has a really great platform on it. You maybe know that it's the first, actually, Nokia phone to be based entirely on Qt. The application framework is Qt. The platform application frameworks are based on Qt. It's also a truly open source platform. The underlying system, it's Linux, it's open source. The tooling is open source. And well, as I said, the application frameworks are open source. So I think it's really a great device, but it's missing one thing, I think. Do you know what it is? True. It's missing you guys, you developers, to make awesome app for it and make this phone actually even better. And actually, it's also a great form for that. It's very, very easy to make apps for it. And I'm going to show you that. This presentation is going to be a step-by-step guide on how to make an app for it. And hopefully, when you will leave this room, for those of you who have a phone, you will go and start immediately to hack on it. So as I said, I will show you how to make an app for this phone. I have myself some experience on making app for this phone. So far, I made 2 applications. The first one, both are on the Nokia store. The first one is called Trafikanten. I can show it to you. It's an application that allows you to see real-time departures for public transportation in Oslo. So here it is. It's a pretty simple application. It's using a web service. And so you can see nearby stops or just look for a specific stop and, well, just see the departures for it. The Wi-Fi connection is not so great, apparently. Well, here it is. And the second one is called MeeSpot. It's also on the store. It's a Spotify client for the N9. So for those of you who don't know Spotify, it's a music streaming service that allows you to stream music on the phone and also on desktop. And you can actually also download the music. So I can also show you this one. So it has all the features the official clients have on other platforms. You can see your playlists, and of course, play music. It's entirely based on, it's made with QML, entirely the UI, and the backend is C++. It's based on the official lib Spotify. I'm going to show you throughout the presentation some example based on this app, but I will not show you too much of the source code. It can be maybe a bit confusing, but the good thing is it's an open source project, so you can get the source code on qt.gitorious.org in the Qt Labs section, and hopefully you can use that as a good example on how to make your app. Let's have a look at the agenda of this presentation. First, we'll look on how to get started with the SDK. It's very easy. Then we'll have a look at, it will be just a few tips and tricks on how to make your app look native for MeeGo. Then we'll look at some of the APIs you have available. So Harmattan specific APIs. For the people who are not familiar with the term Harmattan, this is the code name for MeeGo on the N9. Then we'll look at how to debug and test your application on the phone, and finally how to package it to then make it available on the store. So let's see how to get started. It's very easy. You need only one thing. You need the Qt SDK. You can download it from qt.nokia.com. You need at least the version 1.1. You need then only to do one thing. It's to install an additional package. It's the Harmattan target. I can actually show you that. So you need to use the SDK maintenance tool. It's in the SDK directory. You have the package manager. And here, it's currently in the experimental section. So you just have this package. You just have to check Harmattan, and it will install everything you need. The emulator, the documentation, and the frameworks. So I'm not going to do that because it's already installed. So once you have done that, you are actually ready to go. You have two choices to develop your application. If you don't have a phone, you can still make an app for it. You have the emulator. If you make an app and you test it in the emulator, it's supposed to work exactly the same as it was running on the phone. So you can even submit your app like this. You can perfectly develop your application in the emulator and then submit it to the store. And if you have a phone, then you just have a few things to do to get ready. First, on the phone, can we see? So you just have to go in the settings. And then you have the security section, and here you have the developer mode. So you just have to enable that. It's disabled by default. So you just enable that, and it allows you to install well, a lot of tools that can help you during the development. And what it does also is that it adds a small application. Here it is. It's the SDK connectivity tool, and it enables you to configure the connection between the laptop or your computer and the phone. So we're going to do that. You just launch the application on the phone, and then in Qt Creator, you go in the preferences, and here, this is automatic. It creates for you automatically a device. You just have to set the address of the phone. So here, you have the choice of using either USB or being on the same Wi-Fi network between the computer and the phone. Right now, I'm going to use the Wi-Fi because I actually am having a problem with the USB on my Mac, but yeah, so we just select Wi-Fi, and it gives you the address of the phone, the IP address, and the password. So in Qt Creator, you just have to enter that address and the password. It should be, no, it's not okay, so I just change it. You can test here just to check that the connection is okay. hopefully the Wi-Fi networks. Okay, there's maybe a problem with the Wi-Fi. That's why I wanted to use USB. Anyway, that's about it. And once you have done that, you're actually ready to go and start the development of your app. Once you have installed the Harmattan target, when you create a project in Qt Creator, it creates automatically for you all the files you need to make a Harmattan application. So here you have Qt Quick project, Qt Quick application. This is the default one. Let's just leave it everything default. And here you can select exactly Qt Quick components for MeeGo. Let's select that. And here you can select the Harmattan target for building.
Question?
Yes? Can you just wait for the microphone?
So I see a lot of SDKs there, but some of them are not good, right? What exactly is the difference between Platform API and MeeGo 1.2 and Harmattan platform?
Actually, I'm not really sure what is the difference between them, but
Which is the right one then? MeeGo 1?
I've always been using the MeeGo Harmattan API.
Okay.
And I'm going to use that right now.
Okay, thanks.
So then it asks you for providing an icon. And then it actually creates also some files that are used to make the package. So actually it does a lot of things for you. Since I'm having problem with the connection, I can't actually show you, but just this project that I just created, I could just run it, and it will work right out of the box on the phone. It's a simple example. I'm going to try again just to check. Okay, well, apparently that's not going to be possible. But the project that it creates for you is already a small application that runs directly on the phone.
I just had a look and I saw that it looks like it's still using the DEB packaging system, does it?
Sorry?
Well, MeeGo is supposed to be RPM based, but
No,
it's all DEB.
It's Debian based.
It's Debian.
Yes, the packages are Debian packages.
Okay, so it's similar to the stuff we know about on the N900.
Yep.
And do you also support the repository thing from the N900?
So actually that was it. Just for getting started, that's just as easy as that. But once you set up all this, you of course gonna have to make a choice on how to make your application. On the N9 you have several options. The first one, that is the recommended one, is to use Qt Quick with the components, QML components. I really recommend you to use that option. I think it's the best one. But if you don't want to use QML, you can still use MeeGo Touch. This is a C++ framework that is based on top of QGraphics View. So it basically provides you with the same components, UI components. The only difference is that it's a C++ framework. Yes? Question?
I've heard that a lot of the apps on the phone are actually done with MeeGo Touch. And I was wondering, is the documentation available, or And is it the same quality as the QML documentation? Because officially, QML is recommended, but I'm also interested in MeeGo Touch. You know, what should I do to learn more about MeeGo Touch?
I think at the moment the documentation for MeeGo Touch is not included, at least in Qt Creator. I'm not sure on, because so all the documentation is in Qt Creator when you download the Armat and Target, but you can also get all the documentation on developer.nokia.com. I'm not sure if it's there. You can check. But anyway, in the Qt SDK, you have all the headers with the documentation that you can get there. But as I said, it's not recommended to use that. So that's why I think the documentation, at least at the moment, is not included. You have a third option, is QWidgets. You can use that, actually, it's going to work. But I strongly don't recommend you to do that. You should not use QWidget, because not only you won't have native styling on the platform, but also performances are not very optimized. So I just put it here on the list so you know that you can actually do that, but you really shouldn't. You can also use Qt WebKit if you want to make a web-based application. And finally, if you want to make a game, probably you won't need any of this. We'll just need OpenGL, so you can just create a QGL widget and then have your raw GL code. Let's now have a look at a few tips and tricks on how to customize a bit the style of your application. So I'm going to talk here about only the use case when you're using Qt Quick. So as you know, you can use the Qt Quick components to make your application. I'm not going to give you an extensive description of all the components you have available. Maybe some of you were at the previous presentation in the same room about Qt components. So it provides you with a lot of components like button, switch, checkbox, or progress bar. But there's one, I think, the most important one. It's created automatically by Qt Creator when you create a project. It's the item called page stack window. And basically, it allows you to get what you see on the right part of the screen. It's the main application layout. It gives you a status bar, a header, well, actually a content area, but you can put a header bar, and a toolbar. So just by using this item, you will get automatically all that you see here on the right. But if you don't want to have this layout, you can, of course, well, use any other item, QML item. Another cool thing you can do is reuse the theme icons. All the icons that are used by the built-in application.
Excuse me, just one question.
Yes?
I was having a problem. I didn't want in my application the toolbar to be shown. And I disabled it, but it's still showing on the startup of application, but then hides.
Okay.
Do you know any solution, or why is this happening?
I don't know about that bug, but maybe about that you can maybe come to me after and we can have a look at it.
Okay, I'll show you.
Yeah. So about these icons, so all the theme resources like icons, backgrounds, or even button backgrounds can be reused in your application. There's a QML image provider that you can access from your code, and you can reuse all of the icons. So you can, to choose which icon you can use, actually, everything is included on the Qt SDK, all these resources. So it's just in the Qt SDK directory, and as you can see here, like for example, we have the icons, and here we have all the icons that are used in the phone. So you can reuse them. Like let's say in our application we want, or like for a background, for example, you want to have a custom background, you can, here, if you go in image, we look for, search for background. Okay, actually, it's a bit more things than I was expecting. But if, let's say we want to use this one in our application. So you just have to get the name of it, the name of the file without the extension. And then it could creator, let's say, so in our example that was just created, we just want to reuse that so we can create an image element. And all you have to do is to use a custom URL scheme. It's like this. That tells to get the image from the theme resources and just pass the name of the file we just found. And so you can reuse like this any of the resources of the theme in your application. You had an example here. Another thing you can do to customize a bit the style is use what it's called the inverted theme. By default, all the application, like an application, when you create it, it's the normal theme. That's black text on light background, so typically, yeah, black on white. But if you want, you can change that and use white text on black background. There's one thing you should know is that having mainly dark colors on the screen will save battery compared to having a lot of light colors. So, well, again, that's also just a choice about the style, but you should maybe take that into consideration when making your application, that actually using the inverted theme will save battery. Another thing you can do is change the theme colors. So there are some guidelines actually for making app for the N9 that are available online. And if you look at them, you will see that the theme defines a set of predefined colors. You can see them here. And that's what is called the accent color. It's one color that will be used for example, header bars, button background, checkbox, progress bars. By default, the one by default is blue. It's, I think, the second one, the second blue. At the moment, in MeeGo Touch, you can change that easily. On the version that you have on your phones, you cannot do that from QML, easily at least. But in a future release, it will be available, and it will be just, actually, I forgot to show you something. It was just about the inverted theme. If you want to change the inverted theme to inverted theme, the only thing you have to do is to change one property. So let's say, in our case, we want to do that. So we can do on our main page when the component is complete. We just have to do like this, theme.inverted equals true. And that's all you have to do to use the inverted theme. And so in the same fashion, for the accent color, it's not yet available, but it will. It will be exactly the same way. You use theme, so I'm going to replace that. It's theme.color. And then it's a string that you can, each color has a name from color 2 to color 19, I think. So, well, you will basically just have to do something like this. And then all the Qt components will have, well, the accent color you choose. So I talked a bit about the guidelines. If you want to have more information on that, here is the address where to look at them. It can be useful. Now let's have a look at the different APIs you have available to make actually your application works well on the device. The first thing you can do is optimize the application startup. I don't know if you noticed yet, for the one who got N9, the startup of an application can be sometimes a bit slow. So you should really optimize this. And there's an easy way to do it. It's to use what is called the Invoker program. By default, actually, when you create on a project for Amazon in Qt Creator, it does that automatically for you. But you should just check that it's actually doing it. What this program allows you is to speed up the startup by using pre-allocated Q application and Q declarative view. So the object is actually created when the phone starts up, and then every application that are going to be launched will reuse the same Q application object and the same Q declarative view. So just a few arguments. The first one, the -- type equals D, just means that it's a QML application. If you're making a MeeGo Touch application, this argument will change. It will be a M. And, well, depending on the type of our application, you just have to change that. But this is in the documentation. Yes, a question?
Is there any way to control under which user my application is going to run? So do you use the multi-user concept of Linux, or is everything run as root or as user? Or so is there just a single user, or what concept do you have? And how do I determine in which part of the file system my application gets installed?
Which part, sorry?
Of the file system, because not everything that should be under user bin, for example.
I will actually come back on that later, a bit later. Another cool thing that the Invoker program allows you to do is to have a single instance. By default, if you don't use that argument in the Invoker program, every time you will click on the application icon, it will actually start a new instance of your application. So just by using this argument, if the application is already launched, clicking the icon again will just make the already launched one active. And the last thing you can do is use a splash screen. So you just use this argument, providing the location of your splash screen. I think that's actually important because, as I said, it can take a while to launch the application, and using a splash screen just gives a feeling of more responsiveness.
Hi. Is there a way to specify a splash screen when the device is handled in a portrait fashion and then in a landscape fashion at startup?
Yeah, you can actually, I don't show it here, but you can provide two splash screens, one for landscape and one for portrait. So
okay,
it's just
perfect.
select the right one. So that's it about Invoker. I wanted to tell you also a few words about screen rotation. If some of you are familiar with N9 development, it's a bit different. For the N9, it's easier. It's done automatically for you, at least in Qt Quick application. The only thing you need to take care about is to, actually what you can do is for each page you create in your application, you can define the orientation for each page. So as you can see here on this small sample code, you have, for each page, you have a property called orientation lock. By default, it's set to automatic. So that means that if you rotate your phone, the page will also rotate. But you can change that to lock portrait, lock landscape, and lock previous. I think the names are self-explanatory. So yeah, if you want to make an application only in portrait mode, for every page you create, you will have to set that property. Orientation lock equals page orientation.lock portrait. You have to set that explicitly for every page. Now, I want to tell you a few things about data storage. Depending on the type of our application, that can be important. So as you can see here, these are the three partitions that are on the phone. The first one is where all the applications are put, like the built-in ones, but also the one you download, and also, well, the OS. It's 4 gigabytes. You have the partition that is in home user. This is all the application data, so typically the settings or the databases. This is 2 gigabytes. And finally, the last one is the one that actually is the biggest one. So if you have a 64 gigabyte version, it will be actually 58. But if you have a 16 gigabyte version, that will be, well, less. But the important thing to know is that if your application, well, has a lot of data, like typically images, videos, or music, you should pay really attention to put it on that partition, because, well, then if you don't, you're going to fill up either the application memory or the settings memory, and that is bad. And actually, anyway, your application, if you submit it to the store, it will probably be rejected if you put the files in the wrong place. So you should be careful to put like big amount of data on that partition. If you create a file, like I think maybe that will answer your question, I'm not sure, but if you just create a file, the current, like the application current directory is in home user. That's all. So if you just create a file like this, it will be there. Yes? Question?
I was clicking to a third topic here now because I have problem with that on the N900.
Yes.
The VFAT, well, if the phone crashes or whatever happens to it, are you doing a file system check? Because it's a non-journaling file system, the VFAT.
Hmm?
The VFAT
Yes.
from Microsoft is a non-journaling file system. So whenever you have a crash or whatever, you have to do a file system check. And if you don't do that, you end up in a situation where you can't use the file system anymore. This happens on the N900. And I'm wondering if you took precautions on the N9 so that this does not happen.
I don't know much actually about that, but
Okay. And the previous question was, can I control under which user actually an application is running so that I have a multi-user setup so that an application runs with its own user? Or is it all only root or this whatever user it is?
It's only user, yes. It's the user called user. And I don't think there are multi-users management. Another question?
Yeah, so actually you can run a process with any user. You just need to use the manifest file, and if you ask for the proper user ID or group ID in that manifest file, you can actually run your process with any user.
Good to know.
So
I talked about the settings. You have two options. Yes, a question.
So I still have a question. So this is a Linux-like environment, and I'm curious if I can access services like terminal, maybe an FTP server or something.
Sorry, did you said is there a FTP server on the phone?
No, I have a question if I can have access to a terminal, something like X command or something to send command like a bash?
Yes, you can connect to the phone with SSH and just run any command you want. You have also a terminal on the phone when you activate the developer mode. You can use.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So about the settings, you have two options to store your application settings. You can use either gconf or qsettings. The thing to know is that it's the preferred way is to use gconf because, as you might know, the N9 has a backup and restore feature. And so when you use gconf, when you will do a backup, it will back up your application settings. If you use qsettings, it won't back up the settings. So if you care about that, if you want your application settings to be backed up, then you should use gconf. Another thing you can do with gconf is that you can define what is called a setting applet, and then you can actually change your application settings from the settings menu of the phone. So for that, you just have to define an applet and use gconf for the settings. qsettings only, well, as I said, it doesn't back up the settings, and you cannot use this settings applet with it. Another thing is I told you about the importance to put the things in the right place for files. So there's a class called QDesktopServices. It's in the Qt mobility packages. And you have this function called storage location. You can provide an argument, like you can see here, like documents location, temp location, cache location. Basically, it gives you, depending on what you want to store, it gives you the right place where to put your files. But there's one thing, actually, I'm not sure at the moment, is here, the last one, the mydoc things, I'm not sure this function ever returns that one. So if you really have a large amount of data, you should really pay attention that it will be always in that partition. Another important thing is power consumption. It is a mobile phone, and well, your application shouldn't use all the power in just an hour or two, or actually even less. So you should really pay attention so that your application use as less as possible energy. There are a few things you can do to, well, optimize the power consumption. The important thing, I think, is when it's in minimized states. So, well, as you know, the N9 is you can actually minimize the application. If you just swipe from the left or the right or the bottom, the application just will be in the background and you can launch a new one. So what you should pay attention to is that when it's in that state, you should really try to do nothing. When I mean nothing, it's no UI updates, no data updates, and also, as possible, free like big resources, like typically images. Yes, question?
Yeah, my question is about how do you get informed within the process that you switch from one state to another?
Yes.
Is there a signal or something like that?
I was actually going to talk about that. So exactly to know that, you can know it from C++ or QML. In QML, I'm not sure I remember, but I think there's a property called, I don't really remember the exact name of property, but there is a property that tells you the current status of the application, like if it's active, if it's minimized, yeah. So, and you can know also that from C++. So, well, typically when it's in minimized states, you should stop doing any update in your UI. And also, like typically, if your application is fetching data from internet, like if, let's say, your application is a Twitter feed reader, then you should avoid to do that when it's in minimized state, and only do it when it's in the active state. So I'm saying this because actually there have been a lot of rejection on the store about that. A lot of applications were doing too many things when they were in the minimized state. So you should pay attention to that if you don't want to have too many rejection for the store. Another thing you can do to save power consumption is using an API called the system heartbeat. It's basically something similar to a timer. It's useful when your application is doing periodic updates. Like I mentioned, like if you're doing a Twitter feed, like a Twitter client, you probably gonna want to update, well, the feeds every, I don't know, 10 minutes. So what you should do, if you want to do something like that, you should use this API, and basically, you're gonna provide an interval, like you're gonna say, I want my updates to be done every 10 minutes, and so that's the minimum interval, and you can set an upper limit, like let's say 15 minutes, and what it's gonna do, all the applications that are using this API, it's going to basically synchronize the update for all applications. So it has only to wake up the phone only once, because that actually costs a lot of power. If it first wakes up the phone, fetch some data from internet, then go back to sleep, and then immediately another application wants to update something, and wake up the phone again, and that's not good. So this API allows you to do that, to synchronize, it allows to synchronize all the application to do some processing at one specific time. So that's useful if you have typically like periodic updates. Question?
So basically, is this system heartbeat API available in Qt right now, so we could use it?
No, it's Harmattan specific.
It's Harmattan specific, but can I use it, for example, now?
Yes. You can access it from QML or C++.
Okay, and can I adjust, for example, the time frame? I mean, when the updates will be, for example, not 10 minutes, but 4 minutes instead, or?
Yeah, you can customize, like it's a time frame actually set up. It's a minimum like time and a maximum.
Oh,
so it can happen at any time between this time frame.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Next thing is what is called the resource policy framework. Basically, what it allows you to do, in one sentence, it could be said it allows you to make your app live in harmony with its environment. What does that mean? Well, as you know, a phone now is more than a phone. It can be used in different modes. You can use it as a music player, as you can use it to browse on the internet, or, well, call. And the phone behaves differently when it's in one of these modes. For example, if you're listening to some music and someone is calling you at that moment, of course, the music should stop. So basically, this framework allows you to react to device mode changes. What it also allows you to do is to get sufficient system resources. So I'm talking about memory and scheduling priority. So, well, let's go a bit deeper into that. The resource policy framework defines three things. The first one is what is called resources. That can be either physical or just abstract. So that can be, like some abstract thing can be the audio playback, or it can be the buttons, like for the volume or the lock button. Basically, these are what your application can use. Like if you're making a music player, you will need the resource called audio playback. And the second thing is the resource class. That's the class of your application. It can be, for example, a call application, game, player. And what it does is that when you need a resource, a phone resource, the class of your application will give the correct priority to get the resource. So, well, this framework is not always useful. Like if you're making a simple app like, I don't know, a Sudoku game, you probably don't care about that. But if you're making a music player, it's actually very important. Just one thing actually about that is that by default, if you don't use that framework, an application behaves actually like a music player. So if your application is making sound, actually it will automatically stop the sound if someone is calling you at that moment. The last thing is the control group. This is a bit similar to the resource class. It's basically you have to define one control group. It's basically the type of your application. There are a set of control group defined. It can be telephony, camera, gaming, also player. And that is to control how much resources are can be used by your application. So it can be the memory. Depending on the control group, you can have more or less resident memory. And also, like for example, typically if your application is a game, it will give you higher scheduling priority. So basically your process will never be interrupted. By default, if there's too much load on the phone, your process can be just stopped. But again, if you're setting it as a game or a player, it won't. But I haven't actually said how to use that. Basically, what it allows you to do is to actually request permissions exactly to use the resources. So use it actually in a simple way. It's just about using a few functions. You just have to define the resource your application are going to use. So in a simple example, like let's say you're a music player, you need audio playback. So you're going to use this framework by saying when you want to play something, you're going to use the framework to ask permission in a way to play music. And if you can actually play it, like no one is calling you, nothing is happening, then the framework is going to tell you, okay, now you can play music. And only in that case, you should actually start to play music. If someone, or the other way now, what this allows you to do is that if you're currently playing music and someone calls you, then the framework's gonna, a signal will be emitted and tell you the resource is lost. So you should actually do something about that. Like if you were playing music, and so the framework tells you it's not okay anymore to play music, you should, it's just about giving an expected behavior for the user. Like typically a music player, you should put the music to pause so the user understands, okay, now it's in pause and I can start it again later. What was the question?
I just want to ask, in QML we have an audio element.
Yes.
Do we have to implement the resource policy ourselves, or is it already aware of it?
So as I said, by default, an application is considered as a player, but nothing is actually really done for you. You still have to do that in C++, but it's actually even more useful, because, for example, using this framework even gives you extra features. Like, for example, in the case of a player, to request the resource called audio playback, by doing this, if this resource is granted to you, then automatically, without doing anything, it will, on the phone, then the volume keys will actually control the volume of our application. You won't have to do anything about that. It will be automatically done if you request that resource. So that's, yeah, that's a nice thing also about this framework. Are there any other questions about that? It's maybe not very clear. Yeah, just wait for the microphone.
I'm wondering if all applications are basically equal on the Symbian platform. For example, you more precisely control if an application has access to the network and what is allowed to do, reading your contacts or whatever. Mm-hmm. So on this MeeGo system, every application has full access to everything, basically.
Yes, it doesn't work like Symbian for that.
Is there at least some protection that, for example, if I would test a malicious application from the OV store, that it cannot send expensive SMS or so?
I'm not actually
in this direction?
really sure about that, but I don't think you need special... I know it doesn't work like on Symbian. You don't need to explicitly set, I want to use the network, I want to use other things. By default, you have access to everything. But, yeah, I don't know so much about that.
And is anybody taking care about, like, checking the strings which get uploaded on the application so that they, for example, don't send SMSs?
Yeah, I think someone's actually the answer.
Yeah, so it was the task of the security framework to implement this defense against the malicious applications. But as far as I know, it's now checked inside the OVQA process. So because the GSM standard doesn't really provide a clear logic for high rate calls, as you mentioned. So, for example, we could have some whitelist or blacklist, but now, as far as I know, it's detected inside the OVQA process.
Hi. So still about security. What about assessing the file system? So it seems any application can assess. So the use case is the following. Mm-hmm. I have a malicious application that assess my data on the file system and sends it somewhere. Mm-hmm. Is there a way? So this is not. This has nothing to do with the GSM. It's just.
Yes, I think as it has been said already, I think these kind of things are tested during the QA process when you submit your application to the store. But I don't know so much about security classes with this phone. Maybe, yeah?
I don't know much either, but I know there is a security framework. It's called Aegis, and you have to request for permissions. The problem is that they're pretty much always granted. So, for instance, there's a contacts database, and you can ask for permission to read-write. But as far as I know, you always get it. Yeah, the QA can look into that, you know. And for the data, for the app that we've done, and from the testing that I've done, you have full access to my docs from your app. So there is no sandboxing as far as I know.
Actually, I have to admit that I don't buy this the reasoning with the GSM standard, because that's sorry, but if I download a game, for example, and just want to have a look at it, and it starts sending SMS, which I don't expect from this kind of application, it should be possible to stop this completely, that such an application cannot send SMSs, and it's not part of the GSM standard or whatever issue. Because I don't want to have it send any SMS to any number, for example, or causing calls and that kind of stuff, because this could be easily abused and be a money-making scheme.
Yes.
And that will hurt the platform, significantly.
Maybe we can come back on that in the end of the presentation, because I need to move on.
Okay, I'll try to keep it really quick then. You mentioned something about a QA, or someone mentioned something about a QA process. It's nice. I don't think it's going to do much good. An average intelligent hacker will know how to write an application that will only start doing very bad things after a week or so. And since the applications come online after 2 days, and I can be a little bit smarter than that as well, just not time. I'm not a hacker, and even I can think about something like that. So I don't think the QA process, if it's one in place, is not going to help. You might as well skip it.
Yeah. Actually, if an application is going to do something bad, it needs some...
We'll come back again on security problem. We can have more questions about that in the end. So another cool thing you can do, as you maybe know, the N9 has 3 home screens. The first one exactly is the event feed screen. Then in addition, you have the application home screen and the open application home screen. So there's an API to actually send your data to that home screen. By default, it only allows you to see your Facebook feed and Twitter feed, but your application can well, send data to that home screen. The API is called the Events Feed API. It's very simple. It's basically a dbus wrapper, and it consists of only one function. I can show you in the documentation. I don't have a running example. Here it is. So it consists in only, I can reduce that one so you see better, of this function. It's called just add item, and you provide with a title, the body of, well, your feed item, an icon, and, well, other stuff, but basically it's just about that. You just have to use that function if you want to send feed to the home screen. Maybe one thing you should know is that, of course, for that to work, your application needs to be running. But if you want your application to send things at all time, then it's a bit more complex. You need there's a plugin API, so you need to define a plugin that will wake up at a periodic interval and will actually fetch the data you want to fetch, and then, well, just send that thing to the home screen. Let's now see how to debug and test for the N9. It's actually very easy. If you already use Git Creator for development, it doesn't change anything. It's just like making a desktop application. Basically, well, you do your code, you write your code, and you just have to click the run button or the debug button if you want to debug. And you can debug both C++ and QML. Just like, as I said, if it was a desktop application, you can set your breakpoints both in QML and C++ and run the application, and will stop at the breakpoints you set. It works exactly the same as a desktop application in Git Creator. One thing you should know is that, well, of course, on the phone, there's no debug symbols. So by activating the developer mode, I showed you before there was a set of tools you can install, and there's one is for debugging. And one of these tools is a a script called debug dep install, and it allows you, so you can run this script, you provide the path of your application on the phone, and it will automatically get all the debug symbols that your application, well, for all the libraries that your application is using. So then you can actually debug properly. Yep. Question? Just.
Sorry, just to get it clear, are the debug symbols then installed on the target device, or are they installed on the system where you run the Qt creator?
Yeah, I'm talking about the device. Like this script installed the debug symbol on the device. You have also a lot of other tools that you can install from the phone. If you're familiar with Linux development, it's basically exactly the same. You have Valgrind, you have another one, useful one is the swap logger if you're making a game that gives you the frame rate, so that can be useful. You have, as I said before, you have a terminal also that is installed when you enable the developer mode on the phone. Another, I told you about the importance of checking the energy consumption of your app. There's an application, a tool that you can install called Energy Profiler that allows you to monitor how much energy you're using, how much CPU you're using, or memory. It's basically, it records. You can launch it, launch your application, basically you start, and it records everything that's happening. And then you can even get that on a file and analyze that afterwards. So you really have actually a lot of tools. I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list. Everything is documented in documentation. It gives you the whole list of tools you can use and what they do and what you can do with them. Finally, let's have a look at the packaging. You actually don't have much to do. Most of the work is done by Qt Creator. It creates automatically all the files you need and actually create the package for you. There are a few things you need to do. First, well, it's to make your own icon. By default, there's a Qt icon when you create an application, but well, of course, you can replace that. And basically, in Qt Creator, if you go in the Project tab, and then in the Run section, here you can see there's a, I don't know how that is called, but this section, Create Package. And that's the basic package information. Here you can set the package name, the version, the short description, and here is the icon, as I was talking about. So basically, that's the main thing you have to do is fill up these fields here in Qt Creator. But you have a few more things to do if you want to submit the app on the store. These are actually the description. I told you here in Qt Creator, you can set here a short package description, but if you want to submit the app on the store, you need also to provide a full description. And that can be done by editing a file. It's created automatically for you in by Qt Creator.
Excuse me, I just got a quick question.
Yes.
Can you do that without using Qt Creator? Like if you have an automated build system and you want to make packages at the end, is there a script provided or something with parameters you can use to generate the final package?
Actually, I mean, Qt Creator is doing that. It's just using some scripts that are, again, I don't know much about that, but I know in the Qt SDK it's using mat. And all the scripts that are used by Qt Creator, actually, I mean, you can use yourself to create the package. Yes.
But are those like documented? And is there some place I can learn about how it works, the parameters, or do I have to just go into the source and check it out?
I don't think Qt Creator at least includes any documentation about that. But you can probably find some documentation somewhere, but I don't think it's included in Qt Creator. It's a Debian package, yes, but yeah.
The packages are standard Debian packages, so you can take the documentation there.
Yes. So yeah, I was saying, so the full description, you can add it actually in the what is called the control file. It's created automatically by Qt Creator. And here you can see for the MeeSpot client, here we have the full description. So you need to fill that to submit your app to the store. And the last thing you need to do is to add the copyright information. Again, it's a file that is created for you. It's just called copyright. It's in your project. And well, I think you know what you have to do. You just have to change the copyright with the one that is adequate for your application, set the offer. And basically, once you have done that, you're actually all done with packaging. As I said, Qt Creator by default does everything for you. Time for questions. Do you have more questions? I guess, yes.
You mentioned previously you actually advised the QML for UI development, so I'm just wondering whether you have some tips for speed up the launch time, because it's a bit slower than with MeeGo Touch Framework.
So, as I was saying, the thing you can do is exactly use the Invoker program. That's the main thing you can do, exactly by reusing a pre-created Q declarative view. It's actually going to speed up the startup time. You can also maybe, in your QML code, you can use loader item to load some of your element only when the application is actually started. But there are, I think nothing that comes to my mind that you can do to optimize further more the startup time. Any other questions? If you have anything else, you can come to me after the presentation and, well, ask me anything. Thank you.